Win big in 2024 with Team Sync from RotoBaller. Import your fantasy teams and sync your leagues. Get customized tools and tailored advice for your specific rosters and scoring settings, including live recommendations from the Live Draft Assistant, Free Agent Finder, and Lineup Optimizer. Sync an unlimited amount of NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL fantasy teams from all of the major fantasy platforms. Get a discount for any premium pass using my promo code Knuckler. Just visit rotoballer.com/radio and start rotoballing like a boss. This podcast is also brought to you by Parlay Play Fantasy Sports. Use my referral code RotoBrady. Get that sweet, sweet deposit bonus. They got free contests, paid contests coming to a state near you. They're slashing lines and giving out boosts all day long. Check it out. It's a fun platform. And what is up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you episode 138 of RotoBaller's official MMA podcast. Tap that. We got UFC Louisville this weekend.
Break out the red panties.
And as far as a week in MMA, it is absolutely jam-packed. There's KSW, there's ONE, there's LFA, Cage Warriors, Octagon, PFL Europe, and Ryzen, including, and that's not even counting UFC Louisville. It's a big week in combat sports. For my picks on all that stuff, follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. Follow the podcast, like, subscribe, tell your friends, leave favorable reviews and comments on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify at Tap That MMA Podcast. So, that's what's coming up, this week. There's The Ultimate Fighter just premiered this week. I really like the talent pool and the international mix. The show itself is kind of a snooze, and, Shev and Alexa Grasso are kind of two weird options at coach. Whatever. I'm mostly just interested in who's going to come out of these weight classes. I wish it was two different weight classes, too. But overall, I do like the international talent mix. I know that a lot of people have been complaining about it this week, so whatever. And also, we got some big interlude episodes coming up. Stay tuned for those. Just working on those earlier today. This past week, UFC 302. The main event between Dustin Poirier and Islam Makhachev was sick. That very much lived up to the hype. It was a weirdly judged card. The scorecards were bananas on Saturday. There was the Lima fight. The fact that Dustin was actually tied 2-2 on one of the judges' scorecards in the main event. But 49-46 Paulo Costa. That is felonious. I think that's the word for if something should be a felony. I should know. But so wild, and it makes me nervous for this week because we got UFC Louisville on Saturday. The card is kicking off at the KFC Yum Center at 5 p.m. Come to the RotoBaller MMA Discord. We'll be talking about the card all throughout the evening. But this is the first time that the UFC has returned to Louisville in a very long time. The last main event, and I think it was either on Versus or on Fuel TV when they last did that. I remember it was Mark Munoz and CB Dalloway in the main event. And the crowd started chanting USA for CB Dalloway, even though Mark Munoz was born in America. So they were really just chanting for the white dude. It wasn't a great look for Louisville the last time the UFC was there. I hope that this is a good event. I hope it encourages to come back to the state of Kentucky. And I hope the judging is where it needs to be after a week like that. We got 14 fights on this card. Starting off with a strawweight matchup between Puja Tomar, 8-4 professionally, and Rayan Amanda, 14-7. So first off, Puja is the plus 270 underdog. Rayan, the minus 340 favorite. Rayan Dos Santos is, really what her name is as well. 2 straight losses in the by decision at the UFC level, including the Contender Series. She got pieced up 103-55 in the striking by Denise Gomez, and she lost a split decision to Talita Alencar, who, it was a close statistical fight, so it makes sense that was a split decision. Puja Tomar is going to be making her UFC debut. She is from India. It's been few and far between. We see a lot more Indian talent coming up in the game now. But it's been few and far between their success at some of these higher levels. But she's coming in through the Matrix Fight Night. where she was the strawweight champion. Her last fight was July of 2023. She has won her last 3 fights inside the distance. I mean, here's the important part, too, because she used to fight in 1 before Matrix. All right? 1 loss in Muay Thai to win. And that was a split decision loss. A loss to Hannah Kampf. A loss to Stamp Fairtex. So the level of competition that she has faced, it kind of makes her record look worse than it is. And Ryan, I greatly, and shout out to Cody from Blood Money MMA Bets for pointing this out as well. I just don't trust Ryan's professional resume. I will say this. In Invicta, wins over Katie Saul and Jillian DeCourcy, that is impressive. One of those fights was at 100. Both fights were actually at 105 pounds. She's going to be small for this. Those fights, I do respect those names. I've had Katie Saul on this show. I love Katie Saul. I do question, when you're going to be coming up to strawweight to fight someone like Pooja Tamar, who is getting so heavily slept on. I think, based on what we know about these 2 fighters, I think this is a spot where it is worth a shot on the underdog. I think Pooja Tamar could win this fight like 40, 45, 50 times out of 100. I think that, that's how the resumes shake out. Plus 270, hit it. But I am not touching either one of them in DFS. I don't think that's going to be worth it. And let's just, I don't know, if you need like a $9 to $12 option where Pooja might be. Next up, we got a bantamweight matchup between Cody Stamann and Taylor Lapilus. Lapilus, the minus 285 favorite. Stamann, the plus 230 underdog. Let's talk about Taylor Lapilus first. Winner of 2 of his last 3. Ultimately victorious in 4 of his 6 UFC fights. The 2 wins that he's coming on, he got 2 unanimous decision victories over Leandro Issa and Callan Lofren. He is coming off a unanimous decision loss to Farid Basharat in a fight where the takedowns made all the difference for Basharat. He also has a loss to Eric Perez. 3 of his 4 UFC wins are by decision. Yeah, 3 of the 4. Cody Stamann. All right, he's only won 2 of his last 6, but he's the winner of 2 of his last 3. One of them was a first-round knockout against Eddie Wineland, and then a unanimous decision against Luan Lacerda. He is coming off a loss to Douglas Silva de Andrade by unanimous decision. Kind of surprising that it was a unanimous decision, honestly. I think it was 29-28 on every judge's scorecard. He did get the knockdown, though. It was a pretty close fight. But my God, again, to give the credit to Cody Stamann, even though his activity level, wasn't there a few years ago, he did have 3 losses in a row, but they were to Jimmy Rivera, Merab, and Saeed Nurmagomedov. He has a draw with Song Yadong. He has a loss to Aljamain Sterling. Those are the losses you go back to. And it's only after this Douglas Silva de Andrade loss where, this optimism I have on Cody Stamann is kind of starting to fade. But Lapilus, I forget, the other win that he has, that Leandro Issa win, September 2016. September 2016. His UFC wins, that are 2 of his last 3, are 7 years apart. So you know what? Even though my love for Cody Stamann has started to fade, I can't, Cody Stamann, I think, has been, keeping the striking a little bit closer and making, he's been, making an all right advantage of it. And, if all it takes maybe to tilt the needle against Lapilus is a takedown or 2, I don't know. Maybe this is wild, but I think Cody Stamann could win this fight 40, 50 times out of 100. Plus 230, hit it. Ow! That's a tough one, though. I could see me really eating shit on those first 2. You never know. You never know, but I think that with what we do know about those 4 fighters, I think that the underdog is worth it in those first 2 matchups. Next up, we got a strawweight matchup between Eduarda Mora and Denise Gomez. Gomez, the plus 160 underdog. Mora, the minus 192 favorite. Mora, winner of both her fights at the UFC level, including the Contender Series. A rear naked choke over Jainena Silva. And a second-round knockout her last time out against Montserrat Ruiz. Denise Gomez, born in 1999. She is quite young, winner of 2 of her last 3. Got 2 knockouts over Bruna Brazil and Yasmin Uruguay. Both knockouts. She has a unanimous decision win over Randa Santos in the Contender Series. Her only 2 losses, right, are to Loma Lookboonmee and Angela Hill. And, like, the issue there was getting taken down. And I think that is, how Mora maybe gets this done, is maybe not losing the striking by a lot, or maybe even, just utilizing, getting your takedowns, controlling, and that's where you land your strikes. I just don't trust Eduardo Mora yet either. Denise Gomez, I think, has really, had great flashes. And the 2 fighters that she lost to by decision, they're respectable opponents. Again, these are 3, picks that I'm making that, I think it's worth it to, you don't have to pick a method of victory. Probably decision for either Tomar or Stamen. I think the more likely to finish would be Tomar, probably. Gomez, I just like straight up at plus 160. I actually think that for Denise Gomez, the effectiveness of her strikes is actually going to be the biggest difference maker here, not any takedowns that Eduardo Mora might get. So I think Denise Gomez, actually, let's just say that she wins this fight. Let's say she wins by TKO knockout. I think plus 160 is fine. I think she actually might win 50 to 55 of these out of 100. Gomez by TKO knockout, plus 450. Hit it. Ow! Next up, we got 14 fights, so hopefully I'm moving at a good clip here. Next up, we got a bantamweight matchup between John Castaneda and Daniel Marcos. Marcos, the minus 120 favorite. Castaneda, the plus 100 underdog. Let's start off with Daniel Marcos. Winner of 3 of his last 4. The last fight was a no contest against Aori Kilang. Those 3 wins in a row, and he outlanded Aori Kilang 81 to 45, and that fight ended in the second round. Beat Davey Grant by split decision in a fight where, granted, he did get kind of, statistically, Davey Grant outlanded him 70 to 48. He got a takedown. He finished Simon Oliveira in the second round. He won on the Contender Series by unanimous decision, again landing 81 strikes, but, throughout the course of 3 rounds. Castaneda, 2 years older, coming off a 2-fight winning streak, both by unanimous decision over Muin Gafarov and Kyung Ho Kang, who he landed 111 strikes on with 3 takedowns. Also has wins against Miles Johns, Eddie Wineland. His other loss, is to Daniel Santos by second-round knockout and to Nathaniel Wood, who landed 131 strikes on him. I feel like I was kind of bummed out by that. I think it was Castaneda and Santos win. I feel like Castaneda let me down at one point. But it couldn't have been, anything besides the Santos win, unless I bet against him. That'll come to me throughout the week. I cannot start off the card picking 4 straight underdogs. That's a tough one. Castaneda, even in a losing effort, he had to get knocked out, and the decision that he lost was to Nathaniel Wood. I do question, if Marcos can hang with the output of Castaneda and the well-roundedness. I think that the output could be a problem. Kyung Ho Gong, that's a pretty good win, honestly, for a guy that had been in the UFC since pretty much 2013. Gafarov has lost 3 in a row in the UFC. For Marcos, you know what? I think Marcos has the slight edge here. I think that Castaneda is not going to get his volume off. Marcos does really well at, going throughout a course of a fight. This is a guy that, is just, if he's not even out voluming you, he finds ways to make the fight close. This is actually a really tough one. I'm going to say Marcos wins this fight like 65 times out of 100. So I actually think minus 120 is a solid value. Outcome of victory, this is a tough one too. I don't know. I'd say like Marcos by decision. Yeah, Marcos by decisions plus 185. Marcos inside the distance is plus 350. I think Marcos by decision probably the best bet there. I think if you go Castaneda, which I think is acceptable, I think you go by decision too, and that's a good number as well. It's a solid value. But I don't know. I think this is where I stop the chain of picking the underdog on this card in a row. It was making me nervous, but I stand behind them all. Women's flyweight. Andrea Lee and Montana De La Rosa. Montana De La Rosa, the plus 136 underdog. Andrea Lee, the minus 162 favorite. Let's start with Montana De La Rosa. All right. Her only win since February of 2020 is against Ariana De Silva by second-round knockout June of 2021. She has a draw in there by majority decision with Mayra Bueno Silva. She got outstruck in that fight 52-30, but she did get 3 takedowns. Losses in that stretch to Vivian Araujo, Macy Barber, Tatiana Suarez, and J.J. Aldrich. Mostly by decision, she did get subbed by Tatiana Suarez. Andrea Lee, born in 1989, she's 6 years older than Montana De La Rosa. And after, a solid 2-fight winning streak for Andrea Lee against Antonina Shevchenko and Cynthia Calvillo, which doesn't even seem that long ago in 2021, now on a 4-fight losing streak. 4 straight decision losses to Vivian Araujo, Macy Barber, Natalia Silva, and Miranda Maverick. It was a split decision to Macy Barber. She got her 5 takedowns, kept the striking close, but split decision loss. She has lost 7 of her last 9 fights. And this is the second fight against Montana De La Rosa. The first one happened June of 2019. She won by unanimous decision. Now, Montana De La Rosa back in 2019 was, 24? So quite young. God. This is a very tough one. I don't know. I think you do opt for Andrea Lee here. Montana De La Rosa, I think has had time to show that she was past the struggles of her younger age, and it has just gotten actually worse since the longer that she's been in the UFC. And it's been so long since it went, but she hasn't even fought that many times after her win. I think the last fight against J.J. Aldrich was really close, October of 2023, and it gives you some hope. But I don't know. I think that the most likely outcome here is Andrea Lee probably wins this fight 65, 70 times out of 100. Her performances, even in losing efforts, have just been better. And the entirety of her career, including the first win over Montana, that has been more impressive. So, even though this fight's closely handicapped, and has this been on the move, Andrea Lee started at minus 138 and moved down to minus 156. So I think that Andrea Lee, minus 162, fine. Lee by decision, plus 120, hit that all day. I'm not touching Montana De La Rosa, and I've seen very few DFS contenders so far. Denise Gomez and the pair of Castaneda and Marcos, probably the best that we've seen so far. Next up, we got a bantamweight matchup between Brad Katona and Jesse Butler. Brad Katona, of course, in a relationship with one former Tap That guest, Katie Saul. Brad Katona, the minus 675 favorite. That's on the move for minus 549. I'm seeing him at minus 700 in some places. Jesse Butler is the plus 490 underdog. Jesse Butler lost his UFC debut to Jim Miller by first-round knockout June of 2023. Real quick, let's take a look at what he was doing, in the time since then or in between. He's 12-5 as a pro, 32 years old. Before his UFC debut, he was in Fury FC, had 3 straight wins there. Sure. All right. He has a fight with a Michael McDonald. Is it a meaningful Michael McDonald? No. I feel like there was another Michael McDonald, but this is not the good one, apparently, that he lost to back in 2019. It's been a good professional career for Jesse Butler, sure, and he's now had 2 straight UFC fights canceled. He had to withdraw from both, he had to withdraw from both. At least one was due to injury. He was that's about the extent of it. It's a pretty regular yet successful professional MMA career. But then we get to Brad Katona, the guy that won the Ultimate Fighter twice, right? Beats Cody Gibson in the finale by unanimous decision, landing 160 strikes, getting hit with 164. And then lost his last time out to Garrett Armfield. And, he got his 4 takedowns to 0. He didn't get taken down. It was 105-64 in the striking. And if I recall, this was 29-28 across the board. So a decently close fight. But here's the thing. I don't think Jesse Butler, if this was a lot of other people, one, Brad Katona wouldn't be so favored. It's just in the situation where Brad Katona is against another fighter around his competition level and he's the underdog, it's a no-brainer to me to take him because of how well-rounded a guy is. And even though all the losses in the UFC, the Ultimate Fighter runs have showed, what he can do at his best. And it's kind of the same rule here, just applied to him fighting a guy that probably doesn't belong in the UFC, or at least probably won't hang around too long. So Brad Katona by decision, probably the most likely. That's at -150. The last time, he's never had a fight not be a unanimous decision, win or lost in the UFC, no matter who he was fighting. Brad Katona just wins fights by decision. -150, hit it. Ow! Jesse Butler.
Don't do this. You cannot do this,
Brad Katona, you're not used to seeing him this heavily favored, but I think it's one that you want to be a part of this Saturday in Louisville. I say Brad Katona probably wins this fight 85 times out of 100. Next up, we've got a welterweight matchup between Charles Radke. You got to pay him to talk to him if you want to. And he's fighting Carlos Prates. Prates is the -238 favorite. Charles Radke, the +195 underdog. Now, Charles Radke, as much as I, will enjoy joking about him for his press conference behavior, he did come up super spoiler for me against Gilbert Urbina, because I really thought that was a get right spot for Gilbert Urbina. Get some more success in there for the Fighting Urbina brothers, because they've had little at the UFC level as far as so many of them made it. And Gilbert Urbina gets knocked out in the first round by Charles Radke.
But I'm not impressed by your performance, and I look forward to...
And he got a win in his UFC debut by unanimous decision against the man they call Blood Diamond, Carlos Prates. Also winner of 2 in a row in the UFC, a Contender Series win by second-round knockout, and a second-round knockout against Trevin Giles, February of this year. Look, I don't want, it makes me feel like I'm sleeping on him again, and, part of it is, still some sort of anger for the Gilbert Urbina win. But, Carlos Prates, Charles Radke wasn't supposed to make it this far, and it's impressive that he did. But Carlos Prates is a guy, not like Gilbert Urbina, that we hope beats Charles Radke. Carlos Prates is a guy that very much should beat Charles Radke. And, we can take a look to see... Where's Radke at? 9-3 as a pro, by the way. He has been knocked out before in his career at least once. He also has a fight with Austin Hubbard, too, all the way back when. In his pro career. 2018, but it was in a caged aggression. So they were both in different spots in their career. I think that Prates wins this fight. The fashion that he's won his 2 UFC fights in, Charles Radke, I think, is going to, be aggressive like he was against Gilbert Urbina. But I think that this is a guy you don't want to be aggressive against because of the knockout power that he has. And I think he's just way too dynamic for Charles Radke. Paredes, by knockout, plus 100. Hit it. And I'm not feeling Radke, but I am feeling Paredes in DFS. Next up, we got a lightweight matchup between Thiago Moises and Ludwig Klein. Thiago Moises is the plus 110 underdog. Ludwig Klein, the minus 130 favorite. Let's start with Ludwig Klein, the favorite, winner of 4 of his last 5. And the fight that wasn't a win, it was a draw with Jai Herbert by majority decision March of 2023. 2 straight wins, a unanimous decision against Ignacio Bahamondes, 56-43 in the striking with 3 takedowns. And AJ Cunningham, who he finished with a first-round kick after he had already landed 60 strikes and 2 takedowns. The other 2 wins, decisions over Devontae Smith and Mason Jones. His stat lines are always super similar. If he puts you away, one, it's probably with a kick. So credit to him there. But, he just lands a few more strikes than you. He's just a little bit busier than you, just a little bit more dangerous. And he's capable of taking you down 1 to 3 times. He has only been taken down twice his entire time in the UFC. Thiago Moises, they're both born in 1995, by the way. Winner of 3 of his last 4. 2 rear naked chokes against Christos Giagos and Melquizael Costa back in January 2023. I remember that one giving me problems at the time. Coming off a win against Mitch Ramirez by second-round knockout at UFC Fight Night 2 Ivasa vs. Tybura. His only loss in that stretch was a second-round knockout at the hands of Benoit Saint Denis. The other 3 losses, since, you'd have to go all the way back to August of 2019 to find the other losses, Joel Alvarez and Islam Makhachev. Before that, he had that 3-fight winning streak, too, against Michael Johnson, Bobby Green, and Alexander Hernandez. So Thiago Moises has been around for a while and has fought some strong fighters. I actually think that Ludwig Klein is going to be like, I'm so hesitant. I'm more impressed with Ludwig Klein's, his victories, especially against Ignacio, Mason Jones, and Devontae Smith. The fight against Jai Herbert, too, was, a very good performance. Thiago Moises, the win over Mitch Ramirez doesn't mean a whole lot to me. The win over Costa doesn't mean much to me. The Christos Giagos win does not mean a whole lot to me. Of all guys, if who's taken on a lot of tough fighters, Thiago Moises, when he has this, 3 or 4 winning streak, shockingly, not that impressive to me. I thought I was going to like Thiago Moises as the underdog, but I like Ludwig Klein to win this by decision. I think he's a play for a knockout too. I think that's probably where I'd go next. If I was going Moises, I think that submission is the move, submission or decision. And for Klein, it's knockout or decision. And decision for Klein, plus 175. I like it. Moises by submission, plus 350. I think it's pretty evenly split between 4 outcomes. I think Ludwig Klein just probably wins this fight like 55, 60, 65 times out of 100. I think he's just going to be a little bit too busy and a little bit too well-rounded for Thiago Moises. Minus 130, I like it. Hit it. That is another tough one, though, and I'm very interested to see how that one plays out. It's crazy. It's against so many instincts for me to go against Thiago Moises when he's a slight underdog. That should be a matchup I like him in, and it's usually one that I would go against Ludwig Klein in, but the needle's moving for me on that one. Next up, we got a welterweight matchup between Miguel Baeza and Punahele Soriano. And I got to go to a different section now of best fight odds. There we go. Baeza, the minus 192 favorite. Soriano, the plus 160 underdog. Let's start with Baeza because I don't know. This was a guy that I feel like I was hard on at one point. Because he had an ugly 3-fight losing streak to Santiago Ponzinibbio, Chaos Williams, and Andre Fiallo. after winning 4 in a row entering the UFC, with the last 2 wins being Matt Brown and Takashi Sato. But the last fight that he lost was a first-round knockout to Andre Fiallo, April of 2022. That was his last fight in the UFC. He's 10-3 as a pro and 31 years old. He's done some grappling since then and had some fights with Jake Matthews and Johan Linessi canceled. So if you take away if you just lost to Santiago Ponzinibbio, a guy who you at least landed 104 strikes against, and you get knocked out by Chaos Williams, I will cut you a lot of breaks. But you get knocked out by Andre Fiallo, who the last I saw got knocked out in UAE Warriors. That gives me cause for concern. And especially now that it has now been about, it's been almost 4 years. Not just since he's had a fight in the UFC, but since he's had a win in MMA at all. With the only win since then coming in grappling. Punahele Soriano. I thought this would get a little bit better as we go on, but we're peeling back layers of why I don't trust either of these guys. 3-fight winning streak to start his time in the UFC. Starts it off against Jamie Pickett in the Contender Series 5 years ago. 4 losses out of 5. Decisions to Brendan Allen and Nick Maximoff. Okay? Especially when, you outstruck Maximoff. You did just get taken down 11 times. That fight was designed to go like that, and even still, Maximoff almost dropped the split decision. The other 2 losses in a row now, a second-round knockout victory for Roman Kopylov and a second-round rear-naked choke for Dustin Stoltzfus, who took him down 4 times and also got a knockdown. So it was just all-around domination for Stoltzfus. The win, July of 2022, a second-round knockout against Dolce Lungiambula. So, Dolce, that was at welterweight? No, that was at middleweight. Welterweight could be an issue for Punahele Soriano. This is a guy that is traditionally faded as fights go on, and he's coming down in weight. Oh God, this is one it's hard to recommend too much on, honestly. Like Beza, I don't know why I would like him minus 192. Let's see where that started off at. Baeza started off at minus 150. And so people were hitting it. Minus 192 seems crazy for a guy that, has not won in the UFC in so long. And to lose your last one to Andre Fiallo, at least that was a welterweight fight. I am concerned. I can't believe I'm going to do this. I've never liked Miguel Baeza. I've never felt good about him. Punahele Soriano, I think I just trust maybe just like a little bit more. A little bit more. And I don't know. Soriano, I think you give him the credit. I think he can put Baeza away kind of early. I think that's his shot. So I don't know. Soriano wins this fight like 40, 45 times out of 100. Probably closer to 40, 42.5. Plus 160, not horrible. I would go Soriano by TKO knockout plus 275. If I'm going Baeza, I don't know. I would probably just go like inside the distance for Baeza. It probably happens, after the 1.5 round mark, I would say. Or, I think it happens in the latter half of the fight at the very least. Baeza inside the distance, minus 105. That might actually be your best value. Hit it. Ow! These are interesting fights. I don't trust either of these two guys.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
No, don't be scared, homie. Come on.
And that's been the case in a few tonight. Next up, we got a middleweight matchup between Julian Marquez and Zach Reese. Julian Marquez, the minus 142 favorite. Zachary Reese, the plus 120 underdog. Let's start with Zach Reese. Won his fight on the Contender Series by first-round armbar over Eli Aronoff. Then lost by knockout slam to Cody Brundage, December of 2023. That's the sample that we have from Zach Reese. 6-1 as a pro, 30 years old, fighting out of Shiner, Texas. 4 career wins by knockout, 2 by submission. He was in Fury FC before that, but the last Fury FC opponent he fought and beat before the Contender Series, Tommy Britton, who had a record of 5-10. Then you start off and you lose to Cody Brundage in that fashion. Julian Marquez is 4 years older. He will be at a 5-inch reach disadvantage. And I'm already nervous because, you might be able to tell from my tone, I do prefer Julian Marquez in this spot. He is coming off 2 straight knockout losses to Marc-Andre Barriault and Gregory Rodriguez. Sam Alvey, Maki Pitolo, he subbed both those dudes. His last 3 wins in the UFC. The next one is against Darren Stewart. He also beat Phil Hawes in the Contender Series with a knockout kick. I believe it was a head kick. But his last 2 wins, Maki Pitolo and Sam Alvey. Oof.
Don't do this. You cannot do this,
And I don't mean that because I still prefer Julian Marquez, but that is a concerning last 2 wins to have, especially when they both come in 2021. I understand how you lose to Marc-Andre Barriault and Gregory Rodriguez. I cannot fault you too heavily for that, especially when you land 82 strikes against Marc-Andre Barriault, and that's won 2 of his last 3. And had a good fight against Chris Action Man Curtis. Zach Reese, that Contender Series win, nice. But I don't think that he's going to hang around at the UFC level for long, especially with how he got finished by Cody Brundage, who's now lost 4 of his last 6 fights. And one of those wins was a DQ win against Jacob Malkoun. So I think Julian Marquez probably wins this fight. I'd just say inside the distance. I think that's the best. Minus 142, I actually think is a bargain. And it started off at minus 110. So, and minus 110 is an amazing value for Julian Marquez in this fight. Minus 142, I think he wins this fight 70 to 75 times out of 100. That's a lot of credit to give that guy, but I do think that there is that gap between these 2 dudes. Marquez inside the distance plus 110. Hit it. I think if you're going Reese, you go Reese by knockout, plus 275. I think that's the best way to go there. Marquez, I do think, is a play in DFS this week. Depending on that price. I think he's going to be about middle of the road, though. Next up, we got a middleweight matchup between Bruno Ferreira and Dustin Stoltzfus. Dustin Stoltzfus is the plus 235 underdog. Bruno Ferreira, the minus 290 favorite. Let's start with Dustin. Winner of 2 of his last 3 against Dwight Grant by unanimous decision and Punahele Soriano by second-round rear naked choke. He got knocked out by Abus Magomedov September of 2022. Can't believe that was already that long ago. Ultimately has lost 4 of his 7 fights in the UFC. Had a 3-fight losing streak after he beat Joe Pyfer on the Contender Series with a first-round knockout. He then drops 3 in a row to Kyle Dawkins, Rodolfo Vieira, and Gerald Mearshart. It's been quite an up-and-down journey for Dustin Stoltzfus. Born in 1991. Ferreira, winner of 3 of 4 at the UFC level. A win over Gregory Rodriguez by first-round knockout, and he just knocked out Phil Hawes January of this year by first-round knockout. His only loss, first-round knockout in the UFC to Nursultan Ruziboev, who also has a win over Cedric Dumas. He is coming off that loss at UFC Fight Night Luis vs. Nascimento against Joaquin Buckley. Here's the thing. Ferreira, all 3 of his wins are by first-round knockout. Okay? That is a problem for Dustin Stoltzfus. I think, Dustin is probably too good and has, enough wins of high quality for me to think that number is kind of crazy. But this started off at plus 163, and it's already up to plus 223. If it gets that much higher, think about Dustin. Just give it a second thought. Because I don't think that guy deserves, that bad a treatment or that bad of a perception. But Bruno Ferreira, I think you got to give the nod to him. If for nothing else, I think the outcome of victory is a lot easier to predict for him. Ferreira, I think if he loses, I don't know, submission or just inside the distance for Stoltzfus. But I don't think we need to do that. Like, I don't think I would bet a straight-up victory here yet. If I was going to take one, I'd think about Dustin Stoltzfus if it gets much higher. But Ferreira by TKO knockout, that's minus 150. Hit it. And Ferreira is definitely a play in DFS this week for that knockout potential. He keeps doing it. That's a good wave to ride, especially against a guy in Stoltzfus who is, his last loss was a knockout to Abus Magomedov. Next up, did I give a number to? I think Ferreira probably wins this fight like 75 times out of 100. Maybe 70. It's probably closer. Now we have a bantamweight matchup. They've been trying to make this one happen for some time. We got El Nino Problema. Raul Rosas Jr., the 8-1, 19-year-old pro. They were supposed to make this happen back in February. It got canceled because Raul Rosas Jr. got sick. And Ricky Turcios. Turcios is the plus 190 underdog. Raul Rosas Jr., the minus 230 favorite. This is an awesome, awesome matchup.
Break out the red panties.
When this was first, it's like, this is perfect. This is exactly the pairing of two in-the-cage spirits that you want to see. Let's start off with Ricky Turcios. The Ultimate Fighter winner over former Tap That guest Brady Highstand. Unfortunately, that was his second most recent win, August of 2021. Lost by unanimous decision to Ayman Zahabi. After that, got outstruck 54-27, doubled up July of 2022. But he's coming off a split decision victory over Kevin Natividad, outstriking him 68-41, withstanding a knockdown and getting the split decision despite 7 takedowns for Natividad to Turcios' 2. Raul Rosas Jr., winner at 3 of 4 at the UFC level. Came in through the Contender Series with a unanimous decision. Got a first-round neck crank over Jay Perrin, December of 2022. His lone loss is by unanimous decision to Christian Rodriguez, where he got pretty thoroughly dominated. He only landed 2 strikes. He landed more takedowns, 3 than strikes. He is coming off a first-round knockout victory over Terrence Mitchell, September of 2023. Terrence Mitchell, it's not like he did have to fight Cameron Simon and Raul Rosas Jr., so that's a pretty rough go at it. Yeah, this is a weird one. Like, the Raul Rosas Jr. fight that he lost, and it was 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. Like, we haven't seen Rosas Jr. have to, like, get in the thick of it. And like, that's my only concern, is, like, what if he's not immediately dominant? And I think, like, any fight that Ricky Turcios is in, this has the potential to, go to the judges' scorecards. Fight goes to decision, that's minus 125. That makes a lot of sense. Raul, his last 2 wins are inside the distance, a submission and a knockout. We just haven't seen that happen to Ricky Turcios. This is the weird thing. Like, if you go Ricky Turcios, I think you think that Raul Rosas Jr. is stifled by Turcios' activity level and his energy and just isn't able to immediately dominate and control Ricky and doesn't, ever pick up an offensive rhythm. In that case, Turcios by decision plus 300, not too bad. If you're going Raul Rosas Jr., you have to think that he's the guy that is going to finish Ricky Turcios, because you got to really buy in to Raul Rosas Jr.'s talent to believe that. Raul Rosas Jr. inside the distance, plus 150. I think that's a really good number. I think Raul Rosas Jr. probably wins this fight like 65 times out of 100. Maybe 60. Plus 230 is probably too much. But, we've seen such up and down stuff from Ricky Turcios that I don't feel confident enough in that plus 190 number. And I definitely don't feel good enough at Raul Rosas Jr. at minus 230 to, like, use him for a parlay or anything. This is a fight that I think, especially with Raul, like, even though we've seen him recover from his first professional loss, this dude's still 19. And Ricky Turcios is still a dog. So that gives me pause on that one. I like those methods of victory. I think that both guys are kind of a decent play in DFS. Just because I could see Tercios, winning a 3-round decision, now striking Raul, 60 to 25. I could see that. I'm just really excited to see the outcome of that one. Again, a really close one to call. And it's one where I feel more confident in the method of victory picks for both guys more than anything. And now, we are to the co-main event of the evening. And we've got a light heavyweight matchup between Dominic Reyes and Dustin Jacoby. Dustin Jacoby, the minus 245 favorite. Dominic Reyes, the guy who fought for the light heavyweight title twice, I believe. The guy who I think most of us can agree should have gotten a decision win over John Jones and should have been the guy to beat him and should have been the light heavyweight champion. He is the plus 200 underdog against Dustin Jacoby. And right now, like on Tapology.com, Reyes, the number 23rd light heavyweight in the world. Dustin Jacoby, number 17. How did it happen so quick? But Dominic Reyes.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
No, don't be scared, homie.
Let's take a look. Because Dominic Reyes has now lost 4 fights in a row. All right, the 4th loss in a row. Oh my God, this looks so much worse now that I look at it. I feel so less good about this. He loses to John Jones in a fight that I very much think he won. He gets knocked out by Jan Blachowicz. He gets knocked out by Jerry Prochazka, May of 2021. His last UFC fight, November of 2022, a first-round knockout loss to Ryan Spann.
But I'm not impressed by your performance, and I look forward to...
Do you know what that means? That means that Dominic Reyes' last UFC win is October of 2019, a first-round knockout over Chris Weidman. Chris Weidman. All right, the winning streak that really got Dominic Reyes the title shot was Jared Cannonier, who's a middleweight, or should be, Ovince St. Preux, Volkan, and Chris Weidman, a middleweight. He gets them and really beats John Jones. Loses by unanimous decision somehow. But now it has just gotten worse and worse and worse. Born in 1989, by the way, 77-inch reach. Worse and worse and worse for Dominic Reyes. Dustin Jacoby. All right, this is a guy, again, who 4 fights ago, I think beat Khalil Roundtree. Lost to split decision. He outstruck him 120 to 85. The question is Dustin's volume versus the power and the damage done by Khalil's strikes. I really thought that Dustin Jacoby won that fight, and I had money on him, and so I was very upset about it. He was on a 4-fight winning streak before that. Before that loss, hadn't lost in the UFC, since January 2012, somehow. Because he came back and was on the Contender Series, 8 years later. But now, after the Roundtree loss, he lost a unanimous decision to Azamat Murzakanov. That was a fight that he lost. He lost a unanimous decision to Alonzo Menifield. And what was a great performance by Menifield, and it was 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. He does have a win August of 2023 by first-round knockout over Kennedy and Nchekwu. Okay. I'm changing my tune on this one. This is another one where I thought, Dominic Reyes plus 200. That's got to be a steal. At first glance, but no. I do not think so anymore. It's been way too long. And if the Jiri loss was the last one for Dominic, I would still give him the benefit of the doubt. Because that's, you fought 3 champions in a row. But you get knocked out by Ryan Spann. By Ryan Spann, then Dustin Jacoby is going to be a real problem on the feet. Your last win is Chris Weidman. Your last official win. Dustin Jacoby has been a lot more active. He always comes out, ready and a very viable option to win. I think it could be a decision, but Dustin Jacoby by knockout, given how the fights have been ending for Dominic Reyes, Jacoby by knockout plus 110, hit it. And Jacoby by decision plus 300 is not too bad either. I think if you go Reyes, I think you got to go by decision. That's plus 550. I think Jacoby is just way too skilled on the feet to get put away by Dominic Reyes, especially at this point. I can't believe I feel that strongly, but I think Jacoby wins this fight like 75 times out of 100 right now, which is wild. How quickly, in just a handful of years, how quickly things change for you. And then we look back and we're not all that impressed, retrospectively, when we look at Dominic Reyes, regardless of how, the John Jones fight, was it lightning in a bottle? Sometimes it's looking like that, but things obviously change for Dominic Reyes, and it only gets worse the more that you get knocked out. And now, after 13 fights, we are to the main event of the evening for UFC Louisville.
Break out the red panties.
We got a middleweight matchup between the number 5 and the number 9 guys in the world, according to Tapology.com, respectively. Jared Cannonier, the plus 102 underdog. Imavov, the minus 122 favorite. Let's start with Nasruddin. All right. Coming off a win, a really good one, against Roman Dolidze, that he won by majority decision. Because it was a 5-round fight, and one judge had it a draw. It was Ron McCarthy, so remember that. But he outstruck Roman Dolidze 112-34. He got a knockdown in that fight. He had the no contest against Chris Action Man Curtis, June of 2023, where he was dominating Chris, or thoroughly beating him. That was a fight that he was well on his way to winning before that no contest. And before that, his last loss is to Sean Strickland, January of 2023 by unanimous decision. He got hit 182 times, but he landed 123 times. The 3-fight winning streak before that, Ian Heinich by second-round knockout. Edmund Shabazian by brutal second-round knockout. And a unanimous decision win over Joaquin Buckley. Very impressive run there for Nasruddin Imavov, and just a little bit weird fighting the champion and the no contest where he was winning to keep me super interested. Jared Cannonier, born in 1984. The man is 40 years old. All right. He has won 4 of his last 5. Who are Jared Cannonier's 2 last losses? His only 2 losses since May of 2018? Robert Whittaker by unanimous decision and Israel Adesanya by unanimous decision. In both of those fights, he only got outstruck by a combined... Hold on, let me figure this out. He only got outstruck by a combined 42 strikes. Combined between Izzy and Robert Whittaker. The 4 fights that he has won since then. Unanimous decision against Kelvin Gastelum. Lands 81 strikes and a knockdown. Knocks out Derek Brunson in the second round back in February of 2022. Survives the 3 takedowns to knock him out. Sean Strickland by split decision, December of 2022. Lands 141 strikes in what was a very close fight. But that's where the power of Jared Cannonier's shots, when he can match the volume against a guy like Sean Strickland, who will hit you with so many touches that are designed to break you down over the course of 5 rounds. He ends up with the split decision, and then he lands 241 strikes and 4 takedowns against Marvin Vettori. Look, I gave you a lot of reasons to like Nasruddin Imavov. This is a guy that lands triple digits when it goes, 5 rounds. Credit to him. The dude's very good. His best win being Roman Dolidze. The other 3 of Heinich, Shabazi, and Buckley all being pretty close together, in terms of quality of win. Chris Actionman Kurt, that should be a win. But, Cannonier, even at 40 years old, has just remained rock solid. His last fight was less than a year ago. And the 2 wins in a row where he lands a combined 382 strikes against Sean Strickland and Marvin Vettori, and gets Marvin Vettori down 4 times. There is no reason for me not to have all the confidence in the world in Jared Cannonier. And I don't have to tell the killer gorilla at 40 years old. But even though you're the slight underdog.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
Come on, don't be scared, homie. Come on.
Folks, the volume and the strength and the power by Jared Cannonier is going to be a problem. All right, Nasruddin Imavov can, out dynamic and out volume guys like Roman and Chris. But when they have the volume and the power, and you can't impose your will on them like you could against the Edmonds and the Ians, and you're not fighting a guy like Buckley who really should be a welterweight, I think Jared Cannonier just has a little bit of the edge. My God, look at the contenders and the champions that he has beaten over his career. And just the quality of his last 2 losses. The only guys able to beat him in 6 years are the 2 best middleweights of that era before Alex Pereira arrived. So I think Jared Cannonier wins this fight 55 to 60 times out of 100. Plus 102 is a no-brainer. Hit it. And I would go Jared Cannonier by decision plus 225. And I think really, if you go Imavov, I think you probably go decision too. And I think, in that instance, you got to bet on Cannonier losing a bit of a step. And, something about Imavov, just being the younger dude. Maybe it helps him in those championship rounds where still Cannonier has plenty of experience. And, it's just going to be so hard for Imavov, I think, to keep Jared Cannonier under, 80 straight, let alone 100 or, however many. That's just not a battle you want to have with Jared Cannonier. And I think it's going to be a real problem for Nasruddin Imavov to take it to any other place. So I'm all over Jared Cannonier on Saturday. Folks, that is it for episode 138 of RotoBallers' official MMA podcast. Tap that. The UFC is back in the Bluegrass State on Saturday. UFC Louisville at the horribly named KFC Yum Center. Again, show up to the RotoBaller MMA Discord. Let's talk about this card all throughout Saturday. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady for picks in a huge week of MMA. We got Ryzen and One and PFL. Let's go. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify. Folks, it's also the start of the UFL playoffs. Check out my spring football gambling content. It's already at a close, sadly, but check out that spring football gambling content as we enter the postseason. Thanks for listening. Have yourselves a great weekend. Enjoy these fights in the great state of Kentucky. Peace.